So today, we're diving deep into a work that really shaped how we think about knowledge itself. It's excerpts from Francis Bacon's Novum Organum, Foundations of Scientific Method.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that Bacon, writing centuries ago, he was grappling with really similar concerns about how effectively humanity was acquiring knowledge, or maybe how ineffectively. He wasn't just some detached philosopher. He was deeply invested in reforming the very process of understanding the world. He lived during a period of immense intellectual change. The scientific revolution was dawning, and he became this really powerful voice advocating for a new, more rigorous approach to inquiry.
Exactly. And while he admired the intellectual energy, the curiosity of the ancient Greeks, he believed their methods, and frankly, pretty much all approaches before him, suffered from a fundamental weakness. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack Bacon's core arguments about how we understand the world, to expose the inherent pitfalls that can, skew our thinking, and ultimately to understand the path he proposed for more effective and reliable inquiry, getting it right, basically.
Yeah, getting it right. And building on this critique, Bacon introduces this really powerful analogy right near the beginning. He compares trying to gain knowledge without a proper method to performing manual labor without tools. Imagine trying to build a house with nothing but your bare hands.
It's such a vivid image, isn't it? Trying to assemble something complex, something substantial, without the necessary instruments. I mean, no matter how strong you are, how many people you have working with you, you're going to be severely limited in what you can actually achieve. He even uses the example of trying to move a massive obelisk with just brute force. It's impossible.
Utterly impossible. And what's so insightful is how Bacon directly applies this to intellectual work. He argues that attempting to understand the intricacies of nature using only our minds as they are what he terms raw brain power is equally inefficient. We're essentially trying to tackle these monumental intellectual challenges without the necessary tools or strategies, just
Yeah.
kind of flailing around mentally.
Right, and he even says that adding logic, in the way it was practiced back then, is like oiling the hands. It might seem like a preparation, maybe a slight improvement, but it doesn't provide the crucial leverage, the real power needed for true intellectual breakthroughs. You're still fundamentally limited because you don't have the proper instruments. Oiled hands can't lift an obelisk either.
Precisely. It's like trying to perform delicate surgery with, I don't know, a butter knife. You might be meticulous, you might be careful, but the fundamental lack of appropriate tools just hinders any real progress. And Bacon goes even further, arguing that this traditional logic actually comes too late in the process.
Too late. How so?
Well, by the time we even begin to apply these logical rules, our minds are already, in his words, tainted. They're prepossessed with corrupted doctrines and filled with vain idols just from our everyday experiences.
Huh. So our starting point is already messed up.
Pretty much.
Think of it like trying to purify a stream by running it through a filter that's already clogged with gunk. The filter itself is contaminated, right?
Right.
So it can't effectively cleanse what passes through it. Our minds, shaped by our daily encounters and all these unexamined beliefs, they act like that stained cloth, just coloring and distorting the information we try to process logically.
Exactly. So, faced with this fundamental inadequacy, Bacon proposes a pretty radical solution. He says we need to begin the whole labor of the mind again.
Wow. Not just tinker around the edges.
No, no. This isn't about making minor tweaks or adjustments to existing ways of thinking. It's a call for a complete intellectual reset. Imagine hitting Control-Alt-Delete on your brain and starting totally fresh. That's the level of fundamental change Bacon is advocating for.
Okay, that's ambitious. A total reboot. But how? You can't just erase your mind.
Well, no, but he emphasizes that this fresh start requires constant guidance. It's almost like being led by a mechanical aid right from the very beginning. It's not enough to simply try and clear our minds. We need a structured system, a detailed method, and the right intellectual tools to guide our inquiry from the absolute outset.
So it's not just about wiping the slate clean. It's about having a plan and the tools for what comes next.
Exactly. It's like providing an apprentice not just with raw materials, but with a comprehensive blueprint and a full set of precisely crafted tools from day one. Instead of learning through messy trial and error with inadequate instruments, we need a systematic approach that guides each step. Now, before diving straight into his new method, Bacon offers two important preliminary warnings, or maybe points of consideration.
Okay, good to know. I'm all ears.
Yeah.
What does he want us to keep in mind as we consider this massive reset?
Okay, first, he really stresses the importance of maintaining respect for the thinkers of the past. He's not suggesting we should just discard all previous knowledge or dismiss the contributions of everyone who came before. His aim isn't to get into some kind of intellectual turf war or just declare everyone before him totally wrong. He's not trying to be a jerk about it.
Right, he's not just being a revolutionary for the sake of it. He recognizes that past thinkers might have stumbled onto valuable insights, even if maybe imperfectly or through flawed methods. His goal is more like building upon that foundation, not tearing it down entirely. It's like, we're upgrading. We got better tools now, but we respect the people who built the original structure.
Exactly. It's about progress, not erasure. He sees his work as offering a more effective method for discovery, a way to build more reliably and maybe reach greater heights, but he acknowledges the groundwork laid by his predecessors. His second point is equally nuanced, I think. He emphasizes the importance of not disrupting existing philosophical systems and their current uses.
Their current uses, like what?
Well, in areas like discussion, rhetoric, teaching, day-to-day stuff almost.
Ah, okay. So he's not advocating for like burning all the old textbooks or completely overturning established intellectual practices overnight. He recognizes that these systems, even if maybe flawed for the purpose of discovering new knowledge about nature, still serve practical functions in communication and debate. They work for certain things.
Precisely. He understands that these established ways of thinking have their place in certain contexts. It's like older maps might still be perfectly useful for navigating familiar routes within a city you already know. However, if you want to venture into completely uncharted territory to truly explore and understand the unknown, well, then you need a fundamentally different kind of map and compass. A GPS, maybe, like you said earlier.
Right. The old tools might be sufficient for familiar tasks, but for the really ambitious goal of penetrating nature, as he so eloquently puts it, a new, more precise, and more effective methodology is absolutely required. Okay, so respect the past, don't break the current useful stuff, but recognize we need something new for discovery. Got it. Now, Bacon also delves into the inherent tendencies of the human mind itself, the things that can hinder this pursuit of knowledge. He introduces this really crucial concept of the anticipation of the mind. What's that about?
Yeah, the anticipations. What's particularly insightful here is how Bacon identifies this natural but ultimately flawed way our minds often operate. He argues that we have the strong tendency to jump to conclusions, to prematurely form general principles based on just a limited number of observations. We rush ahead, and this is often driven by a desire for quick answers,
That's
for
right.
readily available understanding, even if it's maybe superficial.
We're impatient creatures, aren't we? We see a few pieces of the puzzle and immediately want to assemble the whole picture, even if we're missing crucial parts. It's like experiencing a couple of warm days in early spring and immediately declaring, yep, winter's over, summer's here.
Exactly that. Or maybe noticing just a few instances of a particular phenomenon and immediately formulating a universal law based only on that limited evidence. Think about superstitions. They often arise from this kind of hasty generalization. A single negative experience associated with a black cat leads to the broad, sweeping conclusion that all black cats bring bad luck.
Yeah, that makes sense. It feels easy, it feels natural because it aligns with our innate desire to make sense of the world and find patterns quickly. But Bacon argues that this anticipation of the mind is fundamentally flawed because it doesn't stem from a thorough, systematic, and rigorous examination of the natural world itself. It's driven more by our internal desire for order, not by the actual evidence out there.
Right. And this is precisely where Bacon introduces his alternative, the interpretation of nature. This is really the cornerstone of his proposed new method. It's the process of meticulously and systematically gathering evidence from the natural world, and then, and only then, carefully and deliberately drawing general principles from that well-substantiated evidence.
Okay, so it's a much more disciplined, more painstaking approach than simply leaping to conclusions. Slower, maybe?
Definitely slower, potentially. Bacon acknowledges that it might seem more challenging, maybe less immediately gratifying than the quick, intuitive leaps of the anticipation of the mind. It requires patience, discipline, and a real commitment to rigorous observation before you make big claims.
Withholding judgment until you've really done the work.
Absolutely. It demands a willingness to gather comprehensive evidence before formulating theories. And this leads us directly to one of Bacon's most enduring and influential contributions, his articulation of the idols of the mind.
Ah, the idols. Okay, this is where Bacon really gets into the specific ways our thinking can go astray, right? He identifies these as different types of false notions or ingrained biases that plague the human mind and inevitably lead us into error, like sneaky mental traps that distort our perception of reality.
Sneaky is a good word for them. And there are four principal categories of these idols, each representing a distinct source of potential error in our thinking. He classifies them as the idols of the tribe, the idols of the den, the idols of the market, and the idols of the theater. Great names, really.
They really stick with you, don't they?
Yeah.
Each one paints a vivid picture of a different way our understanding can get clouded. So let's break them down. Start with the first category, the idols of the tribe.
Yeah.
What exactly are these all about?
Right, the idols of the tribe. According to Bacon, these are those deep-seated biases that are inherent to human nature itself. They're not specific to any individual person, but are common to the entire human race. We are all, just by virtue of being human, susceptible to these particular kinds of errors in our thinking.
Okay, so these are universal human tendencies that can lead us astray. It's kind of a sobering thought, isn't it, that just being human makes us prone to certain kinds of mistakes.
It is, but like you said earlier, awareness is the first step towards maybe mitigating them. Bacon argues that our senses and our minds, well, they don't perceive the world in a perfectly objective way exactly as it exists out there in the universe. Our perception is always filtered through the lens of our human experience, our cognitive structure. But simply, we don't see things as they truly are.
Our perspective is inherently human-centered. He uses this really powerful analogy, doesn't he, about uneven mirrors that distort and misrepresent the images reflected in them.
Exactly that analogy. Instead of providing a clear and accurate reflection of reality, our minds, influenced by these idols of the tribe, present a distorted version. It's as if we're all looking at the world through slightly warped lenses, maybe differently warped for each tribe or group, but warped nonetheless. And the key insight here is that these inherent human limitations make truly unbiased observation incredibly challenging. It's hard work.
It's like we can't help but project our own human ways of understanding onto the world around us. Like you mentioned, wearing rose-tinted glasses, everything takes on a certain hue. Whether it truly possesses it or not, that's the pervasive influence of these idols of the tribe.
And Bacon also highlights a specific tendency here. Our tendency to perceive more order and regularity in things than actually exists. We humans have this strong inclination to find patterns, even where they might be purely coincidental.
Oh yeah, we love patterns, don't we? Our brains are wired to seek them out, sometimes to the point where we impose order on randomness, like seeing faces in clouds or identifying constellations in what are essentially random arrangements of stars from our perspective.
Precisely. We naturally look for connections and coherence, and we often invent non-existent similarities and relationships between things, even when the evidence doesn't truly support them. It's as if our minds are constantly trying to create a neat narrative, even when the data is messy or incomplete or just doesn't quite fit. So that's the broad influence of the idols of the tribe, inherent human limitations. Now let's consider the second category, the idols of the den.
Okay, the idols of the den. This sounds more personal, more specific to the individual, maybe, like a hermit in his cave.
That's exactly right. While the idols of the tribe are universal, the idols of the den are individual biases that each of us carries. Bacon describes each person as having their own den or cave, which represents their unique set of experiences, their particular education, their personal inclinations, the books they've read, the authorities they admire, and so on. All that personal stuff.
So all the things that make us who we are, our individual histories, our perspectives can also act as filters that color and potentially distort our understanding of the light of nature, as he calls it. These are our personal blind spots.
Personal blind spots, yes, that's a great way to put it. The things that lead each of us to see the world in our own slightly different way. Bacon recognized how profoundly our individual journeys shape our understanding. He even quotes the ancient philosopher Heraclitus, who apparently said that individuals seek knowledge in their own lesser worlds, their private viewpoints, rather than in the greater common world.
So we can become trapped within our own subjective realities, our own little bubbles of experience and belief, rather than engaging with a more objective, shared understanding of the world. And that can be problematic because it can lead us to make assumptions about the world that aren't universally true, based solely on our limited personal experience or education or whatever shapes our den.
Precisely. It really underscores the importance of self-awareness and the need to constantly question how our individual dens might be shaping our perceptions and judgments. It's an ongoing process.
Now, ready for the third category, the idols of the market.
The idols of the market. Okay, this sounds like it might have something to do with, I don't know, economics or trade, but I suspect Bacon has a different kind of market in mind here.
You're right, it's not about commerce in that sense. In this context, the market refers to the marketplace of human interaction, the form of discourse, and specifically the role of language and communication within that. This idol highlights how the very way we talk about things can profoundly influence how we think about them. The words we use, the terms we employ, can actually become significant obstacles to clear and accurate thinking.
Wow, that's a fascinating idea. Language, which is supposed to be our tool for shared understanding, can actually end up creating confusion. Absolutely, it's a double-edged sword. We communicate through language, but words are often formed based on common and sometimes quite superficial or imprecise understanding. Think about how slang develops or how meanings shift. And Bacon specifically points to the bad and unapt formation of words as a major impediment to the intellect. Bad words lead to bad thoughts, essentially.
So the very tools we use to express and share our thoughts can be flawed, maybe outdated or just clumsy, and can lead to misunderstandings and inaccurate representations of reality.
Exactly. And even definitions, which are intended to provide clarity and precision, are themselves made up of other words. So definitions can't fully resolve the underlying ambiguities or inadequacies of language itself. You're just defining words with more words. Words can inadvertently force our understanding into pre-established and often inaccurate or limiting categories.
It's like trying to fit a complex, squishy reality into rigid linguistic boxes that just don't quite accommodate it properly.
Precisely. And Bacon provides a wonderful, if slightly odd, example to illustrate this.
Right.
The word moist.
Moist. Okay, where's he going with this?
Well, he points out how this single word can be used to describe a whole range of phenomena. It can mean something that spreads easily, like water. It can mean something that cannot be solidified. And maybe surprisingly, it can even be used to describe flame in a certain archaic sense, like a subtle vaporous quality.
Huh. That's quite a diverse and seemingly contradictory set of applications for just one word.
Yeah.
Water and fire being called moist.
Right. So the word becomes this kind of confused sign, as Bacon might put it. It lacks a consistent and precise meaning because it's been hastily generalized from a limited set of common examples, like water, without proper verification across these very different phenomena, including something as seemingly dry as a flame.
So our understanding of the word moist is often based on this limited superficial set of associations, primarily with liquids. We haven't rigorously examined its application across diverse phenomena.
Exactly. And this imprecision in language, this lack of clear and consistent meaning, then inevitably leads to confusion in our thoughts and in our arguments. We end up talking past each other, or even confusing ourselves.
So ironically, language, which is supposed to help us connect and understand the world, can actually trap us in shared misunderstandings. It can become a barrier to clear, accurate thought built by the very community using it.
It's a sobering thought indeed. The very medium of thought can be treacherous. Okay, finally we come to the fourth category, the idols of the theater.
The idols of the theater. This sounds particularly dramatic. What kind of errors do these represent? Sounds like bad acting.
Maybe. These are the idols that arise from established philosophical systems and, importantly, flawed rules of demonstration or proof. Bacon famously calls them fictitious and theatrical worlds. These aren't just the grand, sweeping philosophical systems of the past, like Aristotle's, but they also include deeply ingrained elements and fundamental assumptions that can exist within various fields of knowledge, even today.
So it's like the intellectual frameworks, the established theories and doctrines that we kind of inherit and tend to accept without rigorous questioning.
Right.
Almost like scripts, like the scripts of a play that we internalize and act out without necessarily examining their basis in reality, just because that's how it's done or that's what everyone believes.
Precisely. Just as a play presents a constructed, fictional world that an audience might come to believe is real if they're not careful, these idols of the theater represent intellectual systems. Systems that, despite perhaps having some initial plausibility or internal coherence, ultimately lead to error because they are not firmly grounded in a careful and systematic study of nature, of reality.
It's as if we've bought tickets to a particular intellectual show. Maybe it's physics, maybe it's economics, maybe it's psychology. And we become so engrossed in the performance, so invested in the narrative presented on stage, that we forget it's just a representation, maybe a useful one, but not necessarily a perfectly accurate reflection of reality itself.
Exactly. Bacon critiques not just entire schools of philosophical thought from antiquity, but also specific axioms and long-held beliefs within different sciences that have become entrenched through tradition and, crucially, uncritical acceptance. He uses this powerful theatrical metaphor to suggest that these systems create artificial and ultimately misleading understandings of the world. They put on a good show, but it might be hiding the truth. And what's particularly insightful, I think, is that he points out how even seemingly opposing errors or competing theories can sometimes stem from the same underlying flawed assumptions or methods. They're just different acts in the same flawed play. These idols are particularly insidious because they often come with the weight of authority, tradition, and widespread acceptance within the intellectual community. Challenging them feels like challenging common sense or settled science.
Wow. Okay, so we have the tribe, human nature, the den, individual bias, the market, language traps, and the theater flawed
Yeah.
systems. That covers a lot of ways we can go wrong. So having meticulously outlined these four categories of idols that can lead our thinking astray, what is Bacon's proposed path forward? How do we actually overcome these inherent limitations and these misleading influences?
Right, the solution. Gakin's solution lies in the cultivation and careful practice of what he calls genuine induction. He makes a point of distinguishing this from what he terms vulgar induction, which is basically just simple enumeration. You observe a few instances, swans are white, swans are white, swans are white, and then you leap to the general conclusion, all swans are white.
Which works
Mm,
until you see a black swan.
Exactly. Vulgar induction is prone to exactly that kind of error. True induction, according to Bacon, is a far more rigorous, more patient, and more systematic process. Yes, it certainly involves the careful and diligent gathering of evidence from the natural world, lots of observations. But crucially, it also emphasizes the vital role of rejections and exclusions.
Rejections and exclusions, so looking for things that don't fit.
Precisely. It's not just about finding evidence that supports your hypothesis, it's about actively and deliberately seeking out evidence that might disprove it, looking for the black swans from the start. This process of systematically eliminating possibilities, of carefully sifting through the data and discarding interpretations or theories that don't hold up under scrutiny, that is what Bacon believed would ultimately lead to truly reliable and well-founded general principles. It's about constructing our understanding step by careful step, brick by brick, on a solid and thoroughly tested foundation of evidence, rather than building these elaborate and potentially unstable castles in the air based on hasty assumptions, flawed language, personal bias, and accepted but unproven systems.
Okay, so it's a much more deliberate, critical, and evidence-grounded process, less about quick leaps and more about careful climbing. So let's zoom out. What's the big picture here? What should our listener, the learner, really take away from this deep dive into Bacon and his ideas?
Yeah, the key takeaway, I think the core message is this. Bacon, way back then, astutely identified fundamental weaknesses in the way we humans naturally approach learning and knowing things. He highlighted our inherent tendency to rush to conclusions, that anticipation thing, our deep vulnerability to a whole range of biases, those sneaky idols of the tribe in the den, plus the potential for language itself to obscure rather than clarify the idols of the market, and the real dangers of blindly accepting established intellectual frameworks without question the idols of the theater. Ultimately, he stressed the critical need for a disciplined, systematic, and evidence-based method, what he termed the interpretation of nature, to overcome these pervasive limitations and resist those seductive idols that can so easily cloud our judgment and, frankly, lead us down paths of error.
That makes sense. And for you, the learner, listening right now, someone who is so keen on gaining knowledge effectively and achieving those valuable aha moments. Well, understanding Bacon's insights provides a really powerful framework. It equips you with a critical lens, doesn't it? A way to evaluate information, to recognize potential biases, not only in the stuff you read or hear, but also, crucially, in your own thinking processes. This understanding can empower you to pursue a deeper, more reliable, and probably more nuanced comprehension of any field you choose to explore, any challenge you want to tackle.
And this really leads to a crucial question for your own reflection, for you to think about after this. How might consciously recognizing these idols in your own thinking, the shared human biases, your unique individual perspectives and experiences, the subtle influence of the words you use, and the sway of established ideas in your field or community, how might recognizing all that change the way you approach learning and problem solving, both in your daily life and in tackling those significant challenges you're interested in? Maybe ask yourself, which of Bacon's idols do you suspect might have the strongest influence on your perspective right now? And what steps could you take to actively mitigate their effects?
That's certainly a powerful and, thought-provoking question to consider, really turning the lens inward. And if this exploration of Bacon's ideas has sparked your curiosity, maybe made you think, I see that in myself, we definitely encourage you to delve further into his Novum Organum. It really remains a remarkably insightful and influential work, even centuries later. It continues to offer valuable lessons about the human mind and our enduring, sometimes frustrating pursuit of knowledge.